Hello and welcome to Tell About a Time with Lab Education. I'm Raven Cole and I'm here with my co-host Selena Guilbeaux.
Hey.
And we are the teachers behind Louisiana Anti-Bias Education, also known as Lab Education. Every episode, we invite a guest to participate in our version of a story circle inspired by Junebug Productions. Guests share personal stories that we later unpack and connect to the classroom to challenge bias and embrace diversity. The stories are personal, the conversations are real. We believe that storytelling has the power to make us better humans and better teachers. Without further ado, let's meet our guest.
Yes, today we have Bailey Wax, and Bailey Wax is a writer, director, actor, filmmaker, and theater teacher living in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. After high school, Bailey started a film company called Fagan Films with her film partner, Gray Fagan, and the company has produced multiple shorts for the 48-Hour Film Festival, and Bailey has received actually various awards for a competition, including a few for Best Director and Best Writer. Bailey splits her time on projects across the country, and she is currently working on a few projects, such as one in Baton Rouge, where Bailey is directing Playmakers' winter musical, A Christmas Story, and looking to direct an original short film here in March of 2023. Welcome, Bailey Wax. We're so happy to have you here.
I'm happy to be here.
Yay! I know you have some stuff coming up. Tell us about what's happening in November.
Yeah, so in November, I will be playing a comedy show in Brooklyn for the Brooklyn Comedy Collective. They're doing a festival out there, and I am doing it with my film partner, Gray Fagan, who I started our film company with, Fagan Films. Go check us out. And he has found a lot of fame on TikTok. He has almost 5 million followers. I think he's at like 4.9.
Wow.
And yeah,
Amazing.
We make a bunch of videos, a lot of humor ones. I usually play a Karen type character, which is really fun for me to play. And we do a couple who like is basically, it's set in like present time, but we live like we're in the 1800s. So like I'm not allowed to read or wash clothes with a washing machine or anything like that. And it's a lot of fun, and just very satirical, and kind of poking fun at society. But we're doing a show about this guy named Benji, who is one of his characters, this very emo kid who's like, I want to suck your soul. Like he's this super intense emo guy. And I'll be playing his mom. So I'll be playing kind of a Midwestern hyper-religious woman who thinks that Benji became possessed when he accidentally saw a trailer for Harry Potter. So that'll be fun.
Bailey, where do you get like how? Because this is the opposite of who. Like everything I know about you, I'm like, yeah, that's not you. So how do you like get into these characters, man? How do you get into them?
Well, it's so much more fun for me to play like a farcical type character, right? Like something that we're just like making fun of, or something that's a little bit bigger. I just, not like I can't, play a regular human. I do it every day. But no, like in these videos, I like to play these really big characters just because it's so much more fun. I feel like you get to be super outlandish, really creative, and really kind of push the boundaries. And like I said, I think satire is one of the best things we can use theater and comedy for, because it makes people think about things in a way that they don't even realize they're thinking about something, right? Like, why do you find this funny? Why is it funny to you that this husband is not allowing his wife to read? Is it because we live in a society where even though that's not actually what's happening, there are still things in place that are similar to that? Like, you can laugh at outlandish stuff, but it kind of provokes some thoughts in your head that kind of get the ball rolling on social issues.
I was thinking about influential texts the other day, like texts that just have really sparked a lot of conversation in history. And like a lot of it was satire, surprisingly. And I was just like, I didn't even realize that. Like, I don't know. I guess I was imagining like more like nonfiction text, but like satire, like what's that quote? Like, I think it's Mark Twain, like fiction is the greatest lie that tells the truth or something like that.
And I'm sure Raven, as an English teacher, like Screw Tape Letters, that's such a huge piece of satire, right? Such a, like by C.S. Lewis, such a great piece of satire. It's literally Satan talking to one of his fallen angels through letters, but it's like one of the biggest like Christian novels of all time, So it's so interesting how using that satire and the antithesis of what you're trying to say gets your message across even more than just like telling someone what you want to say.
Right. Well, and it can be also really difficult too, because when people don't get it, right? They
Right.
think they take it at face value, right? I'm thinking, sometimes what I find is that, sometimes people have like these favorite books, but then they don't realize like, actually the reason that book is good is because it's, making fun of, or, my favorite one is Fight Club,
Oh,
Chuck
yes.
Palahniuk. People love Fight Club, right? But then there are these people that like worship Tyler Durden, the main character, but he's meant to be like a caricature of toxic masculinity. It's like,
Exactly.
we can't be worshiping. Like, you missed the point, friend. And
Yes.
so I think I love satire because it invites conversation, right?
Right.
It's always going to invite conversation.
Well, and that's the interesting part about producing our stuff for the internet too, is like there's so much I think that can have a tendency to get lost in translation. So I remember the first like Karen type video Gray and I made. We're really trying to make it as outlandish as can be, so you can see like, do you see how it looks when you act this way at a Walmart? Like, like calm down, Karen. And one of the first videos we posted, we thought was very outlandish, and we posted it and we got a lot of comments back. They're like, I agree with her. She is totally justified. And we were like, oh,
no.
that's not what we were trying to say. So we realized that we had to go even more over the top with how ridiculous it was for people to be like, I think this is a joke. Like, people still to this day don't know if some of these are a joke. And I'm like, how though? How can you not see that this is not real? So, that's definitely the fine line, and the pro and con of satire is you always run the risk of your audience not catching on.
I was gonna say I follow a few like educator TikToks, and they make like these joking TikToks of like, interactions with students and interactions with parents. And it's great satire, but also it is still close to the truth. We still
Yeah.
deal with a lot of really bananas things. Like, do we
Yeah.
get parents screaming in our faces? Sometimes, yes, sometimes that does happen, right? But sometimes people are like, that just cannot possibly true. And it's like, it cannot possibly be true. And you're like, well, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised.
Right.
And you'd be
Right.
surprised at the Karens you see in Walmart, right?
Exactly.
That's just like Abbott Elementary.
Oh my
Oh
gosh.
yes. Oh my
I
gosh.
love it.
I haven't watched it yet. I'm like saving it on my watch list. I
Watch
have
it.
to
Why
watch
would
I
you?
have to watch things in bulk, you guys. I'm too ADHD. If I have to wait a week for something to come out, I will lose interest. I won't watch it. So I'm waiting for at least 2 seasons to fully be out,
That's
and then I
fair.
will start it.
Because the
That is
episodes are short.
commitment.
I have to. I
That is
have to.
commitment.
Or else, I mean, that's how it was with House of the Dragon. We just finished that, and like Bo made me wait a week in between, and I was just like agony. I'd have to rewatch the episode right before the new one. Oh, it's terrible.
Look, I want to get back to Abbott Elementary, but I do want to say
Yes.
the next season for Game of Thrones is not till 2024. So
I know, and I'm gonna die. I'll die.
Yikes.
Yeah.
I don't even know what to say about that. But
Yeah.
going back to Abbott Elementary, the whole thing though that blows my mind, I'm watching this and I'm laughing, but I'm also laughing because I'm a teacher who like has experiences that directly align to the show.
Yes.
And I just
Right.
remember very specific moments, and I'm like, I'm laughing, but I also hope people realize that this is like funny, but like not funny. How funny
Right.
this is. Like, it shouldn't be funny because it's real.
No, I'll
But
never forget one of the first few episodes. There's this like part of basically like, it's a school, right? And it's the story kind of office style of teachers dealing with public education, right? And one of
Right.
the things is like, okay, so, funding is a totally crazy thing, and we need desks, and we've got mold on the walls, and, our floors are falling apart. And then the assistant principal in the show, even though they have all of these problems, they buy like these really fancy signs for the front of the school that like has her face on them, and you're like, oh my gosh, that would never happen. That happened in Baton Rouge. I witnessed it myself. That actually did happen. So it is so spot on though. And the creator of that show, so Selena, help me out, is it Quinta Benson? Am I misremembering that? We'll have to correct
I have to
it.
look up her name. Let me check real quick.
She was on BuzzFeed, but she is a genius. She deserves all the awards. The writing is great. The acting is great. And it is a spot on representation of education. All the funny
I've seen
bits
so
and all
many
of the serious
clips.
bits.
I've seen so many clips, and it makes me just want to watch that entire series. So I'm excited for when my ADHD brain will allow me to sit down and actually watch it.
It's great. And
These
her
darn
name
millennials.
is Quinta Brunson.
Brunson. Sorry, I said Benson. Brunson.
Yeah. So good. so great. And I'm like, she had to have been a teacher or had like interviewed teachers her entire life.
Her mom
like,
was a teacher. I read this. I think her
that's
mom,
what
or
it
she had
is.
family
Yeah.
that was a teacher. So she's got like the experience, right? She
I was
knows
about to
how
say,
it
it's
is.
too spot on to be like, and I'm going to recall my experience as a student. Like, this is someone who
Yeah.
understands teaching. Because what
Right.
gets on
Like
my
Bailey.
nerves,
Like Bailey, your
right?
parents. Yes, your parents are teachers, right? Or your mom
My
is a
mom's a
teacher.
teacher. My grandmother's a teacher.
Oh,
All the
goodness.
ladies in my family.
Generations.
My great grandmother was a teacher. My great aunt was a teacher. All the ladies in my
What?
family are teachers.
Ah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting every time education is represented in movies and shows. It's always like the teacher is the, the bearer of bad news all the time and
Right.
hates kids and prefers to fail and chooses violence. And like, this is for real, like the first account that I feel like is more realistic, but it's also
Mhm.
satire. It's just interesting.
Yeah.
Well-
My grandmother watches it and she is obsessed. She was a special ed teacher for almost 50 years.
Wow.
And she is obsessed with the show.
I don't know how you resist not watching it because
I know if I have to finish the show I'm on before I move to another one, first of all. Second of all, I know if I have to wait a week, that's just not, it won't happen. It won't happen, no matter how much I love it. It's that it's object permanence in the ADHD brain. So like if I put it down and I move to something else, it doesn't exist to me anymore.
Look, I'm also
just gone.
someone, I love to binge. I don't know, like this is like the curse of like millennials on, like all of us, this generation, we all just love to binge things. But I will say, Game of Thrones and now House of Dragons really made me, and now too, like Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power. Those are shows that we wait every week for, and well, now they all wrapped up, so we're waiting years. But that it's made me appreciate like the wait, because I'm someone where like, and like I'm going to talk about this later, but I'm someone that I get into fandoms, so like the episode ends and I'm like running to Reddit to talk about it,
100%.
or like running to TikTok and Facebook. Like I want to know what everyone else is saying about it. I want to know the conspiracy theories. Like let's get into it.
Yes.
So, and that gives you time like in between episodes to think up crazy things. So I do like this format now.
Raven, are you liking Rings of Power? Because I just started it. I'm on episode 5.
We're on the record too. Okay. Well,
yeah.
My answer is yes, but all right.
Right.
Does it touch Peter Jackson? Because I am someone that loves, I watch The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings all the time. We watched The Hobbit like 2 days ago, right?
That's my comfort movie. The Lord of the Rings trilogy are my comfort movies.
Yes, exactly. Like I like made a cloak for The Hobbit premiere, years and years ago. Like I'm, like let's make the great cloaks of Lothlorien. Like let's do this, right? No, Rings of Power, I would say enjoy it as something separate.
And that's how I have to look at it.
Yes, it is not the Silmarillion. It is not, it is not Peter Jackson. It is something else. And but they're doing my girl Galadriel a little dirty, man. I'm a little upset about it. So,
like, gosh, if Kate Blanchett knew this blasphemy. Good Lord.
But I will say it's still fun to engage though. Like, will I continue to watch it? Yes. But I'm giving the like show of the year has been House of Dragons for me. That's what I've really enjoyed.
I completely agree.
So
hey, I know nobody asked, but my comfort movie is Devil Wears Prada. I just want to throw that out there. And this better
Devil Wears Prada?
First of all, I'm going to challenge this. It's not a Lizzie McGuire movie. That's shocking to me that it's not.
I only watch that once or twice a year, Ray.
Okay,
Devil Wears Prada. There was one time where it was on because they loop it on TV, and I was like watching it, and I was like, and then it started all over again. I was like, you know what? I did miss the first few minutes, so watch it over again.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's commitment right there.
Thank you. Yeah, I
see
am
that.
Very
That's
proud of
how.
that.
I am with the Parent Trap, with the Lindsay Lohan Parent Trap. I think that was like my childhood movie, and so like now if it's on, I'll watch it for however long they'll allow me.
Yes,
the actress.
6 pounds 11 ounces. This is how I look at her. Yeah. Great movie.
You would so she's in Abbott Elementary. The actress.
Oh yes, I know. I saw that. My friend sent me a clip like when they first started like
she's amazing.
doing commercials for
she's
it.
Incredible.
She's great.
She was like Jessie.
No, you're right, Bailey. That is my other comfort movie. And I put it on and complain about the storyline
100%.
and how these parents abandon their kids. And I
100%.
complain like I've never seen the movie before. I love it. It's great. In fact, I'm probably going to watch it after this.
I'll literally be like, you raised this child for 11 years and you don't know who came back to you from camp? You're not seeing any
Terrible.
You're her mother? Oh my gosh, I get into it. I get into it.
Okay, Bailey, I have to
Movie
say,
night.
I wasn't sure I could buy Bailey as a Karen, overbearing mom character until just now with that voice
Yeah.
there. I was like, oh, yes, that is
Oh,
okay.
it gets even more intense when I get into character. Character. Yeah, it gets bad.
Awesome. So that kind of brings us. So we're talking about like comfort movies and things. So that actually relates to my story. So I would love to dip into our story time right now. Are y'all ready?
Let's do it.
Yes.
Yeah. So our prompt today is tell about a time you struggled with forgiveness. Tell about a time you struggled with forgiveness. And so I thought really hard about my story. And so I'm ready to dip in. If y'all are, I can go first.
Oh, yeah. I'm all ears.
Here's my story. Growing up, there were two constants in my life. All right. So I had my grandmother, I had my grams, and I had books, right? So those were my two things. I didn't have, the best home. I had kind of a tough time and tough go of it, but I had my grams and I had my books. And when I was in third or fourth grade, my grams gave me the first book in the Harry Potter series. It had just come out, right? And to say that this book, like, something happened within me reading Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Something changed deep within me, okay? And it is just so hard to like overstate the influence here. So I just absolutely loved it. I immediately became obsessed. And this is a series that spanned from when I was in elementary school up until I was in high school. I think the last book came out in like 2007, right? So this was like probably like early 2000s, mid 90s to like 2007. So I grew up with this series. And I just became just so involved and I just fell absolutely in love. And these characters meant so much to me. As a high schooler, I was on like MuggleNet. My first introduction to writing was like writing Harry Potter fan fiction, right? And I'm like laughing, like I'm outing myself right now as like a super nerd, but I was on Pottermore. I was on all the forums, and I just love to connect with this community about Harry Potter. But really, the thing was, you know, I was a deeply lonely kid, I'm not going to lie to you. And to have a story in which the main character, came from a family that doesn't love and appreciate him, wasn't particularly kind to him, and then to find a family and find friends, it just had such an influence on me. And to this day, I really like it. It influenced my beliefs about friendship and loyalty, and I just absolutely adored these characters. Not to mention because Hermione Granger, I knew what it was like to be a little bit bossy and a little bit of a know-it-all, and so I really appreciated that people still loved her, right? Even though she's a little bit bossy and a little bit of a know-it-all. So I just carried this love with me, of reading from Harry Potter. And again, it's just hard to overstate just how much this series meant to me. And then in 2019, J.K. Rowling got real active on Twitter. Really active on Twitter. And unfortunately, it was a case of like never meet your heroes, right? J.K. Rowling's posts were, deeply transphobic. She really doubled down when, people came back and were like, hey, what you said, was terrible, right? And she doubled down about, trans women not being women. She aligned herself with these movements that were just deeply anti-LGBT. Even though, she had this like series in which everything was about acceptance and finding love and finding, your family. And so this was just so this felt like such a deep betrayal to me. Like, right, even though you don't know this person, I don't know JK Rowling, but it just felt like such a huge slap in the face. And then this was also a little I don't know, it was so upsetting to me, mainly because what does it mean for me, as a person that has been so influenced by a series and has been so, this has been such a huge part of my life, what does it mean that I've been so influenced by someone who maybe not a good person, right? And what does this mean for my relationship with the series now? Because, this wasn't the first time, this was 2019, I'm 30 years old. This wasn't the first time as someone that had encountered art that I'm like, we had gone through like the Bill Cosby stuff. We had gone through, Michael Jackson. And in fact, we had gone through Sherman Alexie. That was another one. The sexual harassment allegation. So it wasn't the first time I had encountered like a book that I really loved and then finding out that the writer was, problematic. But something about this situation felt so different to me, because it was like I couldn't put it down, like I like my influence of Harry Potter. Like it was easy for me to put away like Ender's Game with Orson Scott Card because it's like I didn't love that one too much, but Harry Potter I loved. And I just didn't know what to do with these feelings. And then, I'm an English teacher, or was an English teacher. And, what do I do with these students that love Harry Potter? Like, do I just drop talking about Harry Potter in its entirety? Do I just like, because I'm someone where, normally I'm like, oh, they did me wrong, cut them out, right? Like, I'm so like, let's just blow it up. Like, I normally would just like, okay, let's cut them out. And then so I had to do some thinking there, right? And I had to like do some like, okay, let's come to terms with the situation. And, I read a lot of, people talking about what does it mean to have an artistic legacy, right? Because a lot of art is created by people that, or let's just say this, art's created by people, right? And people aren't perfect. And so, hey, what do we do with that? So I had to do a lot of thinking about that. And this kind of comes to, so tell about a time you struggled with forgiveness. I wouldn't say that I've forgiven J.K. Rowling, right? But I will say this, like, I think that forgiveness isn't about the person, right, that did the thing, that did the injustice or did the harm. um I needed to like come to a certain amount of acceptance and peace within myself of like not feeling like a terrible person just because my favorite childhood story was written by somebody that's not a good person. And I had to think about, is it better just for us to like sweep it under the rug? Like sweeping it under the rug didn't feel like an option, right? Like I had to face it. Like I felt like I had to talk with students, right, when they would bring it up, or when they would bring the books up, or when people would ask me, right, for book suggestions. That's a big part of my job. Like still, I have conversations with kids about what book should I read, and Harry Potter used to be a go-to because it's an easy one. Kids love Harry Potter. Um, and now I have taken Harry Potter off of my suggestions list, right? But I don't avoid the conversation, if people do invite it, right? Like, let's talk about J.K. Rowling. Like, I think it's important to talk about what it means to write an influential series or to create a sense of community, which is what I think J.K. Rowling did for me, created a sense of community. I was every night in high school on forums and on J.K. Rowling's website. Like she used to have this website where you would like explore her desk and there were all these Easter eggs and stuff. And it was amazing. And I loved it. Um, but what do you do when you find out your hero or someone that, really matters to you, um, isn't the person that you thought, right? Or has done or said terrible things? What do you do with that? And so, yeah, I've kind of come to a point now where, like, I really think, like, this is something that, there's no easy answer. Like, if you love Harry Potter right now, like, I'm not over here saying, like, don't love Harry Potter, right? But I will say that it's a conversation to be had about, like, artistic legacy. I read, this came out a while ago. This was years and years ago. I read something by Roxane Gay, but she basically said something that was along the lines of, like, there's no artistic work or no legacy that's like so great that we can just choose to look the other way, right? And that's the way I feel about J.K. Rowling. I was so influenced by Harry Potter, and I think there's so much to learn, and this meant so much to me. But there was no great influence that could make me like look the other way if J.K. Rowling's over here saying transphobic things that are hurting and harming communities and harming people. Um, and so I wouldn't say, again, like, I think forgiveness is like a process. And so I don't think that I've like forgiven J.K. Rowling. And I think this is a weird one. Like I chose someone that I've never met to talk about forgiveness with. I'm sorry. I feel like I started with a weird one, but um, I just think that when it comes to forgiveness, it has a lot to do with compassion. And this is one example of someone that I have struggled so hard to feel compassion for. Um, because when challenged, she doubled down. And there was no like accountability. And, there's still all of these movies and she can still be a millionaire or billionaire, right? And there's no accountability here. And so I just think it's a really complicated thing. And it's still something that like I think I struggle with a lot. I think I just struggle with it. But yeah, that's my story. I deeply loved a childhood series, and the writer turned out to be very transphobic, and I just have really struggled with that.
Well, I think that's a great story to share. So I appreciate you sharing it. Um, Bailey, did you want to jump in next? You want me to go?
I can go.
Okay.
Okay, Raven, first of all, I love that. I love that you chose that. Fantastic. Just want to say that. Okay. So, when I got your prompt, I was a little nervous because I had something that immediately came to my mind. I like immediately knew exactly what I wanted to talk about, and made me a little nervous. So actually, it's about my dad and I are in our relationship. So I had to give him a call and just see if he was comfortable with me talking about it, which of course he is. But so when I was 7 years old, my parents got divorced. And before that, for the first 7 years of my life, my dad was my absolute end all be all best friend. My mom, he was an actor. And so my mom would go to work. She was a teacher. And instead of bringing me to daycare, my dad and I would just watch PBS all day together and hang out on the couch and drink juicy juice and just have so much fun. Like he was my absolute best friend. He got me more than anybody in the world. He's very ADHD. I'm very ADHD. My mom is super type A. So I felt like really understood. I felt really validated. And just, I mean, he's a giant kid. We call him Peter Pan still. He's just a giant kid. And just had so much fun with him and loved him so, so, so very much. Still do. But it got a little complicated there when the divorce happened. So, like I said, I was 7 when they got divorced. And I was just privy to way too much information. I was told a lot by my maternal grandparents and my maternal grandfather, who I call Bobo. He's great, but he has always treated me like I was a 40-year-old adult and I was a child. And so just way too much information, being inundated with that. And then also, my dad stayed in Los Angeles after my parents got divorced. We had lived there for a few years and we moved back to Baton Rouge after the divorce. And so I didn't see him. So I didn't really have a lot of that connection that I used to have, right? That physical, like he's in the same house as me. I didn't get to see him a lot, and he was very busy, so we didn't really get to talk a lot. And so I think a lot of that information just kept coming in without any of the reassurance that he still loved me, or he was still there for me, or he was still my dad, or whatever. And living in a house with my mom, who had just gone through a divorce, was not like the healthiest place to be for loving all of our parents and respecting everybody's choices, and So all that being said, I came up in my head with a very clear idea of what was right and what was wrong, and what was black and what was right, and what was good and what was bad. And my dad aligned on the negative column a lot. And like, well, if he loved us, he would be here. If he loved us, he would have done this. If he loved us, he wouldn't have done this. If I mattered at all, this would be this. And so I really built walls mainly around myself to protect myself, but just of total judgment and just really, really uh, anger towards him, a lot of anger towards the choices he made, and towards the situation that I felt myself put in at 7 that I had no control over. And what I did have control over was ignoring his phone calls, and not seeing him when he was in town, and not meeting his new girlfriends, and not going over to his place and stuff like that. That's what I could control. Was that. And so there was just so much anger and bitterness built up in me. And it just got worse throughout middle school and high school. And what I've learned as an adult is that we're human beings, like nobody is superhero. Nobody is this perfect person. And nobody should be, because those are impossible standards to live by. And if those are the standards that you have set for you, of course you're going to fail. Of course you're going to mess up. Of course you're going to trip. Like, there's no way to live a perfect life. Nobody can. And so I think having that idea of who he was before the divorce kind of, married with the idea of him being just a man who made mistakes was really difficult for a 7-year-old's mind to comprehend. And so, like I said, I put those really strict boundaries around him of, if you don't call me when you say you're going to call me, then that means you hate me. And that means you don't care about your children. And that means you're a bad dad. And that means this, and this, whatever. But like I said, as an adult, I start making decisions for myself. I start making choices. I start making mistakes. I start messing up. I start being a human. And I am starting to take a step back and look at it and be like, wow, it's not all black and white. It's not all one way or the other. It's everything is such a big shade of gray. And I think once I started to realize that about myself, I started to do something that was very unnatural for me, which was give myself grace because I'm harder on myself than I am with anyone else in the world. But I started to give myself a little bit of grace. And then I started to realize like my dad cannot flourish or grow or make amends or become a better human if he is in this environment of strict, fences built around him of no ability to grow. There's no grace given there. There's no ability for him to show that he has, made better on some things or made promises come true or anything like that, because all I have is this tunnel vision of unyielding and unforgiving anger. And I remember my stepdad, who is one of the greatest humans ever. I love him. I was so mad at my dad one day, and he was like, "You know what you're doing right now? You are drinking poison and expecting someone else to get sick." And it's true. I took all of that rage that I had towards him, and it was just eating me up inside because he wasn't there, on the nights that he had no idea I was so angry. Like it didn't suit him at all, and it certainly did not suit me, and it didn't serve our relationship. So we definitely have a lot of work to do, kind of similarly to Raven, on the path of really rebuilding that relationship and that foundation. And I do look back and I think there are a lot of years robbed from us because of how unwilling I was to forgive and to move on. But, he's also realized a lot of stuff at the same time as well. And so we're just on this path right now of kind of navigating this adult parental relationship of, knowing each other as just humans and who mess up. And I know his mistakes and he knows mine. And how do we navigate this? How do we be friends to each other? How do we be there for each other? How do I make sure that, I am asking him for what I need and then, not hold it against him if I don't ask for it and stuff like that. And just setting up ways to make sure that, that we're both able to grow from this whole process. That's my
I
story.
know, snaps. Thanks, dude, for sharing your story. Like, wow. I mean, it's the perfect segue, I guess, for mine too, because it's about like close relationships. And so mine is actually about friendship. So, Raven is in my story. So let me just go ahead and throw that out there. So, yeah. So, okay. So this was, um, and the details are a little like fuzzy a little bit for me, but I have like the general, like the feelings are, I remember very clearly. So I'll try my best to put it together and then, all that. So, this was like maybe 2 years ago, or maybe closer to three. But Raven and I were working on our like I think one of our first like big teacher projects together, and we were developing a training at the school that we worked at, and in response to the death of George Floyd, and we were developing this district wide professional development for our school. And so this was something we had never done before. This was before Lab was created. And in fact, that whole experience is the reason why Lab was created. And so we were like figuring everything out. We were talking to the superintendent. We had like really ambitious goals, and we were really nervous about talking with this online community about race and white privilege and all of this stuff. And so there was so much work to be done. We had to, you know, plan videos, do research, script it, record it, edit it. It was just like beyond a lot of time. I think in the end it was like over 80 hours we ended up putting in because I think we added it all up. Possibly more to be real, but like that's what we were able to document. And but yeah, a lot of work went into it. And I think like the first bit of work, we got really excited. We were doing some good stuff. We were like meeting, working it through, be like, yeah, 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 this is so great. And then we were like, okay, we're gonna come back and get back to work after a while, whatever. And um and I remember like kind of, and this is where it gets a little fuzzy, but I do remember reaching out to Raven maybe as co-worker of this project we were working together, and then not hearing anything, and then maybe sending messages as a friend, but then not hearing anything. And then I know that there were things happening that she was dealing with, but I couldn't like, but I was like, a text message? Like, you can send a text message? And so like weeks would go by, and then I think we were getting close to like a whole month where I wasn't hearing much of anything. And then I can't remember how long that went, but I know it went on for a very long time, to the point where I had to do some self-coaching, and I was just like, you don't know what's happening. So, try not to jump to conclusions that this is intentional. But then it started going on for so long that it was getting really hard to disprove. Like I would reach out, not hear anything, but I would see like simultaneously, like on Instagram, things that just like, I was like, okay, you did that, but you could have like reached out and just said, hey, I saw your message about this thing we get to work on, or I saw your message about just whatever friend thing that we were talking about. And so I was starting to feel disposable. And then the thing that just like really set it in, like, all right, we got to talk. And that was one time she texted me, and it was just something like friend wise, like, girl, check this out. And I was like, can't respond to that. I was like, you cannot not talk for as long as you did, and then just try to pick it up like this never happened. And so to me, that was crushing. So I can't remember how it went, and maybe later Ravi could tell us more about like this part, but I think I remember like texting me like, "Hey, we need to talk," and just like straight up being like, "Hey, I'd like to talk with you." And it wasn't like aggressive at all. It was just very much like, in order for us to pick back up like you're trying to do right now, I got to talk about stuff. I ended up calling, and I just straight up was like, "Hey," and not at all confrontational. That's the word I was looking for. Not at all confrontational. Just like, look, um, that hurt my feelings. It makes me feel like you don't care, and that I think I said disposable, and I said it was that's not cool. And I think I said you ghosted me. I was like, you've been ghosting me, and we need to talk about it. We need to get like, it's fine. I don't need to know what's happening, but I just need to know that you need space, and I can give you that space. But ghosting is not cool, and it's like it's not fair. And I remember explaining that I don't want to resent. I remember having a very like we had a very powerful conversation. I remember her being very open and honest and being like, "Yeah, you're right. That is not cool." And I was like, "Wow, that was not," like I was like, "All right, cool. We're talking about this." And I remember being real. I remember there was one point we were like, "But we balance each other as friends." And I was like, "Yeah, but this balance is becoming unbalanced, and I don't want to resent." And that was tough because it was weird to hear my friend say, "This is something I like about you." And me say, "Yes, but I don't want to keep doing that all the time." It was like, "I like that you're outspoken and that we can, you reach out and stuff." And I'm like, "I like that too, but like, that's hard." So it was just, I was like, "I don't want to lose you as a friend. So I'm going to really fall into transparency as much as I possibly can. So to preserve this friendship." And I tried, like, either of us were never like I said, confrontational, which is amazing because I don't know if I had that conversation with a lot of people. I don't think I could do that with anybody. And we actually had a very productive conversation. And the walk away it was like steps for both of us, which were very teacher like. We're like, all right, what's our walk away? What's our next steps? And so, and so our next steps were, hey, if we have to step away for an extended period of time, say it. Hey, I'm in the red zone. I think that was what we decided on, like colors. Like, all right, I'm green, I'm yellow, I'm red. Like, give me some colors so I know. And I'm gonna honor your space, but cool. And then also, remember that like it's you got to do that responding too. Like, I can't be the one to always pull out of the red. Like, you got to pull yourself out too, because it's not unfair to me. And Raven said it really well. She said, you deserve a good friend too. You are deserving of a good friend. So yeah, I struggled with that forgiveness because it was very scary. And then as friends, I was like, I guess maybe in my head, usually I'm like, okay, well, maybe this friendship is just, that's the end of this chapter and I wish her well, and like that's kind of was a thought that I had. And then I was like, maybe I should try a little harder and have a more adult conversation before I close that book. And that's what I told myself. I said, I'm going to give her a chance. We're going to talk about it. And then from there, I'll decide if I need to close it. And so having, I guess the courage to have the conversation would have been easier to just, yeah, you ghosted me 3 years ago and we never talked again. And, that would have been the easy way, but it would have been very sad too. So yeah, so that's my story.
Whoo, I'm giving everybody snaps. Everybody.
I know. I
Everybody
appreciate
snaps.
everyone's story.
Thank you, Bailey, for sharing. And also, I just want to say, Selena did let me know that she was going to tell this before she started.
Okay, good. I'm sitting here like,
so same thing, Bailey, where you called your dad. Selena did call me and say, like talking about stories and yeah, like
good
no,
deal.
I think it's important.
You thought you were watching some live
Look,
Jerry
I was like,
Springer drama.
it's happening. No. So I do think like that. It is the saddest part, like it's really hard. Like I was like, oh no, do I want Selena to tell the internet about one of those times I was like the worst friend, right? To someone who is incredible because I love Selena. And but that was also, I do feel like I learned a lot from that conversation, but also I just want to say I started therapy that year. And so as a result, I think a lot of that also was like, no, you don't just cut and go. And also, no, she does deserve a good friend. The same way, Bailey, like you had to come to no, like people are people, right? People aren't perfect. And I had to like say, hey, Raven, you're not perfect. But also, if Selena is compassionate and kind enough to have this conversation with you, you should have this conversation with her. And so we did. And I like to
and
think
I'm
that
sure,
she forgave me, and here we are friends, years later.
yeah, and I'm sure as like hard as it was to know that she was going to tell this story, Raven, it probably has to help you forgive yourself a little bit too. It probably takes some of the sting off of like that memory of it or whatever, and just lets you feel a little freer about it. That it's something that can be discussed now.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's part of like if we're let's dig into it, y'all. Let's dig into it. So I think that's part of it when we talk about forgiveness, right? A lot of times when there's a situation in which forgiveness must be offered or is wanted, there's some level of like betrayal, and then there's always like some level of like shame, right? Selena felt embarrassed because she looked at my Instagram. I was ashamed because I knew what I was doing. Right. And I'll be totally real. That was a particularly hard year. A lot of things were going on, but also, trauma when it happens to you, and also mental illness when it happens to you, you're still responsible for it. Right. And you're still responsible for the relationships that you have with people in the midst of it. And that's something that I believe very strongly, like, yeah, some bad stuff happened to you, but you can't use that as an excuse to hurt people, right? And it's not an excuse for me to hurt Selena, who, and I'm admittedly, I don't have a super big friendship circle, and Selena was like my first real friend, right? Like in college, and like from college moving into adulthood, and it was a hard, bumpy road to figure out friendship.
But speaking of shame, that's what I felt. I felt shameful for trying to insert myself in whatever you were going through. And I'm like, well, you may be going through trauma, but are you a good friend to me? And like that's what in my head, that was my thought. Like I sounded in my
Let
head
me
like a
just
child.
let me just right here. My reaction is ah, like ah, because both matter, right? Like both things matter, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Ah,
But yeah, it's
Yeah.
scary to ask for forgiveness and to also be the one to kind of kick off the vulnerability.
well, and also like feeling, because my thing is like I was ashamed of avoiding you entirely,
Mm.
right? Like I got really overwhelmed, and then a bunch of bad things happened, and talking about Bailey, like when you hear the prompts, like a story comes up. My thing is I'm not quite sure I'm ready to tell all the stories, right? And so
That's exactly how I was. I was like, how deep do I want to get on the old
how
daddy
do
issue train
right.
here?
And so like I do have a lot of experience with this concept of forgiveness, right? But my thing is I knew that I had done wrong. And I knew that if I wanted to have this relationship, because I do deeply value my relationship with Selena, and I knew if I wanted to maintain this like level of love and friendship with her, like I had to go in honest, and I had to go in like ready to admit what I had done and be accountable for it. And I think that helped. Like it sounds like that is something that, contributed to like this having like a happy ending, right? Or I say ending, but had a happy, conclusion
Resolution.
here. Resolution, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, we're having these conversations about like all of these, like, oh, and then we resolved it by talking with this person. But like in my life, often forgiveness has not happened. Like forgiveness doesn't always mean like reconciliation with a person, right?
Hmm.
um like that's been my experience with like if because it's different sometimes, like there's different levels of like how much a person can do harm. I think like before at some point like it's maybe not healthy for you and that person to have a relationship. And so for me, these relationships, like I might have forgiven them, but forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation and doesn't necessarily mean contact with that person. And that's something that, look, shout out to my therapist, who is a wonderful person and has worked very hard with me. But like talking about like, so Selena, I know we talk about Dr. Nicole LaPera
Yeah.
sometimes. Bailey, I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but she does some good work, but she talks about how sometimes forgiveness doesn't always mean access. And I think that's a
Mm.
really like, when you're on your process to forgiveness, like with you and your dad, which I thank you so much for sharing that story, because I was like, oh my gosh, like what a first of all for being vulnerable, but also just so many people can relate, I think, to that.
Then that's ultimately why I came to that
Yes.
conclusion of being able to
Yes.
talk about it.
But like
Yeah.
sometimes on the journey to forgiveness, like you don't immediately just have the conversation, right? Which it sounds like that's what happened with you and your dad, is like you had to have kind of some talks with yourself, some talks maybe with your stepdad and some other important people with
Oh
your
yeah.
life until you were ready.
Well, and even to this day, I it's something we always say we have a very strange parental child relationship because I kind of raised him in a lot of ways. But even to this day, I'm still feeling like I have to teach him some things. Like he wants to fix everything. Like it's even now, like if he hurts my feelings, it's like, okay, well, I'm sorry. Can we be done now? Can we be done? Can we move on? It's like, well, no, I'm gonna sit with this for a second. It's okay that I'm upset. And it's also okay that you want to fix it, but you got to let me have what I deserve as far as like my come down period. Now, in that come down period, does that mean that I get to be mean to you and, curse you out and say mean things? No, that means that I go in my corner, I do my stuff, and then we come back together when I'm ready. So we both learned how to navigate exactly what you just said. Forgiveness is not access. So maybe I don't answer your phone calls for a few days because that really hurt me. But like what I'm telling you is that I promise I will come back eventually. You just got to give me that space. And Raven, just to jump off of some stuff that you said, I feel like I'm very similar to you in the sense that I can tend to be a cut and run when especially I think I have a lot of have a lot of burdenhood. I feel like a big burden a lot of times to people.
Yes.
And so in friendships, especially, I'm like, look, I know I'm too much right now. You haven't seen that yet, but you will. And before we get there, I'm going to skedaddle. So this isn't
Yeah.
embarrassing for us.
Oh no.
And I would try to do that with Beau when we first started dating, with my wonderful boyfriend of 4 years. And he would be like, hey, buddy, I'm not leaving. We're in this house together. You got to stop. We got to
Yeah.
get through this. Like, you can't just shut off and run. And I think, I mean, it's all attached in my head. It's all tied together to me, because it's like, that all comes from not being able to forgive myself, for struggling on like
Yes.
being able to forgive myself. I'm too much. I'm too this. I'm too whatever. But it's like,
Mm.
no, you're a human. You're a person. You're experiencing something. You've had a traumatic experience. You had a bad day. You have whatever. Like, if you can't give yourself that forgiveness, there's absolutely no way that you can give that to others, or you give too much and you get walked all over. So I feel like it's such
Yeah.
a tight wire act, where you're just like balancing those scales of being able to forgive yourself and also protect yourself and all that.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, I
one
think
thing
it
I'm
was
hearing
sorry.
from one thing I'm hearing from all three of us is that in order to articulate that we needed to give forgiveness, is that we had to really understand ourselves and like the complexities of ourselves. And like, even in a weird way, all of our stories of forgiveness involve forgiving ourselves as well. That's what I'm hearing, which I think is interesting.
Yeah.
And look, I wanted to share this. Gary Chapman, the author of The Five Love Languages, he wrote about what, the quote I'm about to say? No? Okay. So he said, forgiveness is not a feeling, it's a commitment. And
Yes.
so
It turns
I
out I did
know
know the quote. I did know the quote. If you're in therapy right now, shout out to everybody in therapy that has heard this quote. Go ahead. Go ahead. It's
It's
good.
such a good quote because it's so true. Because I felt like that's what I was doing with you when you and I had a conversation. It was
Yeah.
not at all something I'm like, I can't wait to talk to Raven about. Like, I was
Yeah.
like, all right, we have to do this and I'm committed to this. And then also committed to the follow through in the same way
Right.
that Bailey was committed to the follow through. And the follow through is never a moment, right? It's like continuous growth that you're constantly checking in and supporting together. So, yeah, it's
Yeah.
not at all like and I forgive you, the end. It's a process.
Well, I was just going to say, just the process of that. I think it's also really important to be transparent about how it can sometimes be difficult in situations to stick to that commitment, when your emotions get tested, and things come up and stuff. So I just got back from New York a month ago. With I was up there at the same time my dad was. I was on a trip like for business, and he was also up there. And it was the first time in probably 3.5 or 4 years that my dad and I had just been like alone together, and it was super tumultuous. And I had gone up there in my head and I was like, my dad and I are doing great. Jamie and I are going to have a blast. It's going to be so much fun. And it was rough. It was not
Yeah.
good. We were just butting heads. Everything he was doing was bringing up this like, almost PTSD like response in me. Like, it was just not
Mm,
good. And I was also really unkind. I kind of reverted back to like middle school Bailey. Like, I didn't like seeing it myself. I didn't like it at all. But like, when I got home, we had to have a talk where I was like, this is what you did that hurt me, but also this is what I know that I did that really hurt you. And so we had to have this like decompression talk afterwards. And I think that's the part of it that matters, because for so long after that trip I was fixated on like one step up and two steps back. We've just like regressed so much in like our journey and like how we're rebuilding this relationship. But no, it's not about like if you fall, because you will, but it's like, how do you pick yourself back up? What do you do
Yeah.
after that? And so I think like just us being able to have that conversation again is all about that commitment that you have to forgiveness.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, I feel like I had a very weird idea of what, or not weird necessarily. I think a lot of people have this where understanding what forgiveness is, right? Like just getting like a definition out. Like I think for me, forgiveness for a long time, it felt like if you forgive somebody, that means you're like condoning their behavior, right? And saying that like whatever you did was okay, right? Which is not what forgiveness is, right? Forgiveness is when you're letting go of like that resentment, letting go of like those really like negative emotions. Like they say that like forgiveness is more for you than the other person. But yeah, like forgiveness isn't condoning that other person, but it is kind of like offering that compassion, like what you just said, like, okay, well, let me think about my behavior in this moment really quickly. And then also, I think it's really tough too when you think about, again, like there's just like levels, like some things I think I'm very like, okay, maybe I can be quick to forgive. And then other things like I cannot. And I don't know, like I definitely think I'm a grudge holder. Like I am someone that like holds on to the grudges, man. Because I'm a person that's in my head all the time. Selena can attest to this. Like I will remember everything. So it's hard.
Almost remember everything.
Almost. Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, I don't remember the details, but I remember I don't like them. Right. Like, or I remember
Yeah,
like
I know
they
I'm
did this.
pissed. I don't know why.
Goldfish brain. Terrible. Terrible.
So wait, question for y'all. Do you feel like you had good examples of forgiveness growing up of what that
No.
looks?
Yeah. Look, the listeners can't see our faces, but my face is like, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
No. Big X on that one. No. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know about y'all. I grew up in a very conditional household. So it was not a lot of unconditional love. Very,
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
condition based. How we were treated was like, did you do the laundry? Did you do what I asked you to do? How's your grades in school? What's your attitude like right now? Is it gonna disrupt how my attitude is? Is this gonna interrupt my night? Is it like very, very, very
Yeah.
conditional? And so I didn't feel like I had much margin for error there. Like I did not have room to really wiggle and just be a kid. It was very got to make sure that all the, crossing my T's and dotting my I's. So very, very conditional. And I don't think that I experienced it until this adult relationship that I'm in now, until I met Beau. It was the first time that I experienced unconditional love and like I think genuine forgiveness, where I know this is not going to be thrown back in my face in a fight, 2 weeks later. I know that
Yeah.
like this is not going to hang over my head. I know that like you're not going to make me feel guilty about this thing. And I had never ever in my entire life experienced that. But
Yeah.
in turn, and I don't know if you're like this, Raven, but like I know that in growing up in that type of household, I then was way too forgiving and allowing of the other people in my life. So like I would just be like, I'm the problem. I'm the problem. I should be asking for your forgiveness. But whatever you do to me, like I probably deserve it. I'm sure. I'm sure. I'm sure. So that was how it was skewed in my brain. And I really did not rectify that until probably 4 years ago.
Wow.
And still
No,
working
yeah,
on
no,
it, by
dude.
the way. Work in
Look, I was
progress.
the opposite. I was like, no, we'll just cut everybody out. Super isolation. Like I would rather, like, I guess I would avoid it, right? Like rather than even attempt, like the least bit of resentment within me would be like, well, I'll just avoid them forever, but talk about like, your model, like everything was very transactional, I think, for me growing up, like, and that is not conducive to forgiveness, right? This idea of transactional, behavior, but also just yeah, I think forgiveness in a romantic sense, like I don't know that it's that different than, talking about forgiveness with a friend versus, a parent and family. Like I think there are some like common things here that always happen with forgiveness, right? I think like having compassion, I think letting go of resentment. Like there are some things that we can find that always happen. I got like my husband and I, we've been together since I was 17, right? Like we've been together a long time. So he's seen like the crazy Raven versus the Raven that, like I said, has been in therapy and is doing her best, right? And I will say for me, I think the biggest change happened when I stopped thinking about forgiveness as like the person has to be held accountable and whatever accountability. And like for me, like that meant like justice must be had, like something like I have to get like revenge upon them, or like there must be some type of like thing that happens to them that makes them feel bad in return. When I stopped thinking in those terms, I think my life became a lot better, right? My relationships became a lot better. And then also just like you were talking about like forgiving yourself. Yeah, I think like that was part of Selena and I's like friendship is I had to be like, okay, yeah. So you had some mental health crisis that like negatively impacted your friend, she is willing to forgive you and is willing to continue this conversation, or like have a conversation with you about it, are you gonna just be like, oh, like, are you gonna hold on to all those negative emotions and hold on to everything, or are you gonna move forward and try to have like the best relationship you can with this person? And like that, I think, helped is being like, okay, she's willing to give you this chance. Are you willing to give yourself this chance?
Hmm. Growing up, I had conversations about forgiveness, but I don't think they were the strongest. I remember my mom, she still says this today. I hate sorry. I hate the word sorry. And in my head, I remember growing up being like, well, what's wrong with sorry? Isn't that the beginning of like the forgiveness and like of the next steps? And so it almost seemed like if someone did something wrong, there's no coming back from it, or there's no coming back from it without like an extended period. Like someone would have to like do a lot to come back instead of like a conversation being the start, or recognizing the conversation being the start. And that could be for several reasons, like maybe what made her say that, or the experiences that have brought her to that, um, was lip service without the follow through, like we talked about, like, you know what I mean? Like the statement without the commitment. As far as like growing up, I really don't know if I've had like I mean, I know I've had examples because I've seen forgiveness, but I don't know if I've seen what you Raven and I did. Like, I feel like I had learned that through also my experience of being a wife. I
Yeah, if
think
that
that's
had
where that was
happened when I
learned.
was like 19, life would be really different right now, right? Like
Yeah, we would not be friends.
if I had learned these skills, but I'm with you, man. Like, but also I'm just curious too, like, um I, w- this is something that I'm like, oh, I'm almost like afraid to even ask, but like, what do y'all think about like, when someone does something? Because we've been talking a lot about like the personal relationships, like when someone betrays you or hurts you and harms you. But like, what do y'all think about like when, I don't know, like when celebrities do something really terrible and then they write their like apology notes and post it on Twitter? Like, I don't know. I think like that's something that is very specific to our generation that we're having to like kind of deal with, right? Like, and when I was talking about like JK Rowling, like, yeah, like technically she apologized, but right, like, but she really doubled down.
Yeah, so I feel like they are human too. And I feel like should be just given as much grace as we would. But I feel like what's really important is more than lip service, so that
Right.
people don't become numb to it, and that is actual follow through. So if you did something, what are you going to do to restore the justice in a sense in the community? What are you going to do to respond to that? I hope I'm recalling these details right, so please let me know if I'm wrong. But the guy who dates Kylie Jenner, what's his name?
I'm not gonna know. Sorry, man.
Travis Scott.
Ah, I should have believed in myself. I was gonna say that, but I just didn't trust
Travis
I was
Scott.
right. But yeah, so Travis Scott, his at his concert, it kind of got a little crazy that one time. And so since then, he has been like committed to helping with concert safety and stuff like that. And I've seen some efforts. I don't know how much, I can't speak on that, but I do remember seeing that he was like part of like some council, like talking about what to do to improve safety at concerts and whatnot. So I thought that was, to me, that's an example of like the
Yeah.
beginning instead of just being like, sorry that
Yeah.
happened and moving on. Um, and then also a well articulated response, I
Hmm.
think is important. Like, can you articulate what was wrong and not just saying
Yeah.
wrong, like, oh, my bad. Like, what actually happened? Why were those words offensive? Why what you did was inappropriate or whatever it is? And I think we can get past it because I do think it's important if we're talking about models and examples that they model like how to do better once called out, but also we got to think about as a community, what do we do when someone does something wrong? Are they dead
Right.
to us, or are we allowing them to be just as human as we are? And that's tough because it depends on the
Yeah.
act,
Yeah,
at
it's
least for
always
me.
situational. Always. So I grew up with MySpace, right? Like again, I was on the internet way too much, way too much. And so like I grew up with MySpace and I also grew up in Livingston Parish. I grew up in places where my norm was not good, right? Like I grew up around a lot of racist rhetoric and that wasn't something that I knew was wrong because I was a young person until like I actually started receiving an education and actually met people of color. Like I had to do a lot of work in order to like overcome those like internal biases and those things that I had learned, from the people I grew up with. And so yeah, I'm sure if you looked on MySpace, there's some problematic stuff that I have said. The difference though is I am very dedicated to saying, hey, that was wrong. And here's like the process that I had to go through in order to recognize that that was wrong. And here's what I'm doing now to rectify the wrong. And so like that's the difference. Are the celebrities or whatever that we're canceling for call out culture or whatever, are they making the effort to like, hey, here's why this was wrong? Are we doing stuff?
Yeah, and that's a challenge. And I'm thinking about like, okay, I'm a teacher and I'm developing spaces or I'm part of these kids, their lives, and I'm encouraging them to do the hard work of being a part of discourse, right? And developing relationships, and relationships are not always great. Like you and I are great friends and we've had our struggles. And so how do we teach kids to navigate the complexities of it? And so I'm thinking, because I'm worried about kids, especially being where like teens who are more influenced by their emotions and logic just due to the development of their brain, right? And so I'm thinking like, really like teaching them like not everybody's perfect. And this is not to excuse the harm that we've discussed in these stories. Not at all. I'm not talking about excusing. I just want to be very clear there. But like recognizing that not everyone's perfect and looking for opportunities for next steps. Like, um, like Bailey was committed. Raven doesn't even know J.K. Rowling, but you were still committed and took steps, right? Like you did things that were different than what you did before. And like that is a commitment in a different way, even though you didn't interact with her. And you and I in our friendship story also made commitment to forgiveness. So I think like if we're talking about kids, like not looking at things so black and white, like they are good or they are bad, because that doesn't exist. But they are, this is what we can do. And then like, okay, if you make steps and that doesn't work, revisit those steps or recognize that these steps, or if there's harm here, providing space so you're not in harm's way, right? Whether that be emotional or physical. But
Yeah.
I think it's really important, especially as we see youth you know, get
Yeah.
radicalized, right? And that sometimes they are going with this equals good, this equals bad, and a lot of groupthink is happening. And so teaching them the complexities of things. And so kids aren't just agreeing with things because their parents said it, or they agree with it because this person identifies this way, or they agree with it because whatever it is. I don't know. Forgiveness is challenging, but I think it's a really important piece, especially in our
Right.
democracy, to forgive in a very complex situation. Because if I'm other side of you, I'm going to disagree, and I need you to forgive me for if I say a bad idea. If I say an idea that wasn't the best idea, but I learned from you, are you going to allow me to learn from you and move on? Because some people are still trying to hold people to things that they learned from, but it's like I
Right.
learned. I've said I learned. So let's learn together. And I don't know.
I think making that political connection is so important, we talk about like across the aisle and everything, but like, I mean, we all grew up in the South. We know the political climate here. It's like toxically conservative. Well, I grew up with a mother who was toxically liberal. Like she would come home and the first thing out of her mouth every day was, "Have I said today how much I hate
Oh
Republicans?
goodness.
Have I said it?" Like that was like my mom's mantra. She would just always say that. And it was interesting to me to see like the anger and vigor that I saw on Fox News, the exact opposite side of politics, like mirrored in my mom for like issues that I definitely believed in. But in such an angry way and just like unyielding towards being able to see anyone's side. And I think that's where we get that radicalized feeling in this country right now is like nobody has empathy. Brings it back to theater because you need empathy to be in theater, but like nobody has empathy for each other.
Yeah.
Nobody's trying to like connect the dots, connect the pieces, like feel for another human, put yourself in their shoes. And if we don't do that, there's definitely not going to be any forgiveness, and there's definitely not going to be anybody coming together on anything, and we're just going to get more and more, the chasm's going to grow even bigger.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's
Mhm.
hard too when we're talking. I mean, look, politics, no matter what, like this is going to be a complicated conversation, right? But I think one of the
Mhm.
problems with when we talk about like, because what we're talking about is like having empathy and having compassion for different perspectives, right? It's really hard to maintain this mindset of compassion and even encourage it in other people, like we're talking about, like encouraging it in young people, when there's real harm that's being that's happening as a result of like political um, you know political parties, or legislation that's being pushed by specific political parties, and when that is s- actively harming people, right, and they are unapologetically, yes, this is happening, um like how to cultivate compassion in those circumstances, because also like I do think a certain amount of anger might be necessary for change. I don't know, maybe I'm going a little crazy here, but I think that like sometimes like we do need those very intense emotions to create change, to motivate change. But I don't think there's any black and white answers here. So
Yeah, that's true. And then I don't know, it's so hard cuz what you're saying is very true. I feel like sometimes people can, like, kind of similar to what I said about my mom, like holding that withholding forgiveness because there's power there, but that's an illusion. I don't know if there's actually power there. I feel like that makes them, in the sense of the way Bailey was talking about, it makes you feel powerful because you're controlling this. But the truth is that's not powerful and that's not your power. And like to release that is strength. Um, and I feel like sometimes people feel like they're winning by not forgiving, or, and not being willing to move on, or work on a relationship with a friend or classmate or whatever it is. It's easier to hold on and be like, no, she messed up my paper that one time and I'm just going to be mad at them. And I think that's easy. And I think it's hard to forgive is not an easy thing. And I don't think anyone really knows what that means, because not anyone, let me not say that, because we definitely just talked about what it means, but it's it's a very vulnerable experience, and I don't think people know what it means to forgive until they do it. That's what I mean.
I think
It's
that
hard.
is like
yes,
the quote
yes,
takeaway from this.
100%.
People do not know what it means to forgive until they do
Yeah,
it. That is
right.
that's a perfect way to say it, because you don't, you can expect forgiveness from other people, but until you're in that position of having to give it to someone who really hurt
Yeah.
you, and you want to, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, the power you feel from holding on to that anger, right? You just want to hold on to it. And then that freeing like little breath that you take once you've let it go, there's nothing like it. I mean, it's the hardest thing in the world, but also the best feeling
Yeah.
ever. You don't know what it is until you've
Mhm.
done
I
it. Great,
Yes, seriously
Selena.
though, I 100%,
Thank
yeah, because 'cause
you.
I'm like, I don't feel like I understood forgiveness until I was an adult, like 100% until I like started,
100%.
and again, until I was really though, until I was in a position where it wasn't like, oh, someone like, told a secret of mine, like it was a like very high stakes type of betrayal. And then it was, is it even right to like the conversation with yourself of, is it even right to forgive this person, right? Is it moral to forgive this person?
Mhm.
um I'm with you, Selena. I think like it's until you have done it, it's hard to explain. But I think no matter what, bottom line is understanding that it happens when you let go of that negative, right? You let go of the resentment or
Mhm.
negative emotions that you're having, and allow yourself to even begin to feel, compassion and feeling at ease within yourself, right? And not to get too woo-woo, but like within your soul, right? Like there's the not having
Yeah.
that disruption within yourself.
Yeah, totally. Well, I feel like we had an excellent conversation, and we cannot say enough how much we appreciate you for being here, Bailey. And tell us, where can we find you?
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you guys for having me back. I love this. Any chance I get to come chat with y'all is so much fun. You can find me anywhere. You can find, I mean, you mean physically or like social media illy or?
Social
Yeah,
media.
we're not trying to hunt you down at your house unless you
Yeah,
want us
so
to. But where can we
Yeah.
find you online?
I mean, I will come.
right.
Yeah, I
I
can
mean, y'all
come
can come.
if
I
you
don't know
want.
if I want the internet there, but yeah. So Instagram at Bailey Wax, Bailey like the Irish cream, wax like the one in your ear at Bailey Wax. And on online, you can go to faganfilms.com, and that is my film company's website. And then look up Gray's World on TikTok. That's where we make all of our videos and all of Gray's content that we do. And then we should be live streaming the Brooklyn Comedy Special on TikTok. So we'll have someone in the audience who will be live streaming it on his TikTok channel.
Can't wait.
So look out
Can't
for
wait.
that.
I'll be there. Now we'll be tuning into that. Love it.
Wow.
Yay.
Yeah. I have to first download
Oh my goodness.
TikTok, but I
Here-
well then but then we'll watch.
I'll help y'all. We'll set aside a Thursday
Wonderful.
for that. Then no problem.
Yeah, I'll do a little lunch and learn for you guys. We can do a little TikTok
I love
lunch
it.
and learn.
Well,
Little
I love it.
mini
Well,
lesson.
thank you so much, Bailey, for just joining us and just being, so vulnerable with us. We really appreciate your story, and we
Yeah.
really appreciate you just like sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank
Likewise. Thank you guys
you.
for having me.
Alrighty, folks, so that's a wrap, and you can find more information about our guest, our corresponding materials, and this episode on our website, labeducation.net. This has been Tell About a Time. We'll see you next time.